Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cinema Flow podcast. I'm your host, Zach Abdulbaki, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, Mr. Derrick Borte. He is the director of the new crime film, The Get Out, starring Russell Crowe, Teresa Palmer, Luke Evans, Nina Dobrev, and Aaron Paul. The story follows a nightclub owner who is on the verge of leaving his dangerous past behind and retiring. When a masked gunman robs him, he finds himself under pressure from a ruthless cartel. The Get Out opens in theaters on June 26th and will be available on digital June 30th. Now, please welcome to the show the director of The Get Out, Mr. Derrick Borte. Hello, sir. How you doing today?
Fantastic, Zach. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you for making the time. I really enjoyed the movie. It's super entertaining, and I loved how you interconnected the stories of several different characters and had them all converge at the end. I was wondering if you could tell me how this project came about and what appealed to you about the novel Strip by Thomas Perry that made you want to adapt it.
Yeah, well, one of our producers, Mark Fasano, sent both Russell and myself the book, and we'd been looking for something to work on together since Unhinged. This kind of really checked the boxes and really made us both. We both sort of recognized the core of what was there, and really decided this was the one we were going to roll up our sleeves and try to make it work, and here we are. So yeah, it was really one of those kind of things where it was just the book came to us both, and we both responded to it.
Awesome. Yeah, and I loved Unhinged, and I think this one's even better. I'm curious, in what ways is the screenplay different from the novel for The Get Out? And what was it like working with your co-writer, Daniel Forte?
Well, look, I mean, Danny and I have worked together for a long time, so we talk every day, work on various things, pretty much every day, and this was kind of similar to anything else we've worked on in terms of process in the past. As far as what we tried to stay as true to the novel as possible, and really what that mostly boiled down to was Manco and his character, and staying true to the concept of reinvention, the kind of what happens to this guy when the life that he's worked so hard to build kind of no longer fits or keeps with the times. Other than that, we did have to take some liberties. The other cast of characters around him, we felt like would better serve the overall story if they were a little more connected, if they were put on a little bit more of a collision course through the film to try to basically lead to this inevitable explosive collision that they end up with at the end of the movie. So we did take some liberties there. We wanted the characters to be a little bit more connected in their stories, but other than that, I mean, the spirit of the book is definitely still there.
Absolutely. Yeah, it kind of felt like Jackie Brown in that way with all the interconnected stories like coming at the end. I'm curious, were there any influences for this movie? I feel like Elmore Leonard and also resident fan of Unhinged, Quentin Tarantino come to mind, but I'm curious where you drew your inspirations from.
Yeah, I mean, look, to me, I think this definitely was inspired by everything from Elmore Leonard. It's got a little bit of a Get Shorty vibe to it. It's got some Fargo in it. It's got a little bit of Tarantino for sure, a little Guy Ritchie maybe. I think that it's about the absurdity of desperate people, increasingly irrational decisions while keeping the consequences very real, which I think produced the comedy, but also reinforced the stakes we were dealing with. So I think that you find that in a lot of those films where the crime creates the chaos, but the real drama comes from the character.
Absolutely. And it is a very specific tone you're going for because there are very funny moments, especially with Nina Dobrev's character, but the stakes always feel real whenever the characters are in danger. So how'd you go about managing that tone, making sure the comedy was, funny, but also never took the audience out of the movie?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best in terms of this kind of tone that we're talking about, I think the best versions of this really work when they're emotionally accurate, emotionally true, regardless of how outrageous maybe the situations have become. And I think just trying to keep it grounded, that was just kind of what was constantly going through my head. How do we keep this grounded even though some of these situations are pretty out there? And I think that that's what worked.
Absolutely. And at the center of all that's Russell Crowe, who, clearly enjoyed Unhinged because, brought you back for this movie. And one thing I love about him is that he loves doing accents. Like in Unhinged, he's doing a Southern accent. Now he's doing an Albanian accent. Was that in the novel or was that a choice from Russell?
The Albanian part specifically was a tweak from what Manco was. I think Manco was Hungarian or something in the novel. And in talking with Russell about Manco's backstory and how he ended up in LA in the club world and working for the cartel, there's a story that he was talking about with an Albanian guy that he knows, and that what this guy had been through to arrive in America, what he had done along the way. And apparently the Albanians are people that you don't want to mess with. There's serious consequences there. And I think that he wanted Manco to have been through what this guy had been through to actually get to America and have this American dream, but also be somebody that's a force, a formidable character that has seen some things and done some things in the past. And so that was how we arrived at Manco's nationality.
That's very cool. And actually, yeah, he felt relatable, but also like a force, force to be reckoned with. Did Russell have any notes on the script or even on the edit that like helped shape the movie at all? Or does he more like, let you do your thing and he focuses on acting?
Russell has great ideas all the time. He's definitely had suggestions along the way that have been huge and very positive. So, yes, I mean, without a doubt. And I think that I encourage and want that kind of feedback from all of the actors. I want to help them take ownership of their characters. And I think that I was early on in my career, before I did The Joneses, my very first film, people kept saying, like, you've got to have this tight grip on your vision of this. And I always thought, like, it didn't make sense to me because this is film's a collaborative medium. And if you have this tight grip on your vision for something that's too tight, you're going to either hit the mark or fall short of it. Whereas if you surround yourself with amazing people and empower them to do their best work and relax your grip enough to have that spirit of collaboration actually work, that's the way that you surpass your vision of something. And I think that that's very true and applicable to this film because all of these actors bring so much to these characters that some of which wasn't in my head. I mean, some of which they brought to the set and, we might make tweaks to it, whatever, but that's what's so great about this job is that you can be the dumbest guy in the room. You can surround yourself with great people, do the things that each of them needs to do their best work, and watch this thing happen in front of you while you're sort of there for guardrails sometimes, but at the same time, like you've sort of sown these seeds and then you watch it blossom in front of you.
Absolutely. I think collaboration is key. And I remember Jason Bateman said about directing that with getting suggestions, it's not just like about what's good and what's bad. It's about taking the suggestions that all make sense, that we're all making a consistent movie, and you're like the arbiter of that. What was it like shooting in Queensland, Australia? And how did you and your production design team effectively make it look like Los Angeles?
It was definitely kind of a daunting task to begin with, and I immediately picked up the bat phone that I have to my production designer Freddie Waff, who I did Unhinged with, and who's a lifetime LA resident, and I just knew like if the only way to make sure that this was going to look like LA was to make sure I had Freddie's eyes on it, or his hands on it, and so Freddie came to the Gold Coast and we started scouting and quickly realized that we could probably find some places there to make this look like LA, but we knew that we had to really feature locations in LA that are not the iconic LA places everyone's seen. So thankfully we decided to put the club in Koreatown, which is he and I know what K-Town looks like, but we figured we could pass off some of the places we found as Koreatown. We put Manco's house in like Manhattan Beach area, South Bay. So, just to avoid some of the places that might be a giveaway. But I think, having a great art department and really digging deep and trying to find the best locations there. I mean, I feel like it's pretty seamless. I mean, we had a couple days in LA to shoot some second unit, to shoot a few of those actual more iconic intersections and whatnot. But really had a great team that was able to help me, sell it.
Absolutely. And I live in LA and it was convincing. I only knew it was Australia because of the credits, but
Yeah.
you guys did a good job with that. And I want to talk about the cinematography for a minute it. The film sort of felt like a modern noir film. I really loved the tracking shots at the beginning with the neon lights and the opening credits, and you also have a lot of deep shadows on the characters' faces. It felt like the perfect film to watch late at night. I'm curious about the conversations you had with your cinematographer and how you guys crafted the look and feel of this movie.
Yeah, I mean, once again, called my trusty friend and amazingly talented DP, Brendan Galvin, who I shot Unhinged with. We started watching films together. We started watching, some noir. We started watching, I think we started with Collateral, nighttime LA. Let's watch Collateral because, let's see where it takes us. And just went down this rabbit hole of watching films and that spoke to this material. That's basically sort of how we arrived there. But I think it does sort of help, it does capture LA at night in a way that seems to work.
I'm curious about the motif with the bear. We see Manko and Joe talking in front of a bear statue at the zoo, and then later Carrie sees a live bear on the road towards the end of the movie. Was there a connection there, or am I looking too deep into it?
Well, I mean, I think that if you like think about what Manko says in front of this bear statue, basically is that these bears used to rule LA, and then the gold rush happened, and development men came there, and the bears were sort of forced out north, which is kind of a metaphor for Manko at this point. The connection to the bear later on, I think, the bear. If the bear wouldn't have been there and Jeff wouldn't have swerved to avoid it and wouldn't have crashed the car, and if Carrie wouldn't have then, been walking down the road and been picked up by the cops, she wouldn't have been able to tell the cops about Slosser, the dirty cop. And then Carver wouldn't have probably gone to the airport. I mean, it all sort of, is that seeing that bear is kind of the linchpin for what happens at the end of the movie.
I also love the action in this movie because you build up to it very well and make us care about the characters and the story before the guns are fired. I particularly like the scene at Rodriguez's house, as well as the car crash you mentioned and the explosion afterwards. You're no stranger to action, having come off Unhinged. What was it like crafting the action sequences in this movie?
There's a good mix of hand-to-hand and vehicle action in this movie. Unhinged was definitely more car work. I just think having a great team as well as actors that are comfortable with action. I mean, Russell's incredibly comfortable with these things. I just think we had a great stunt team, great stunt doubles. We had great effects team, and it's a process that you think about. What can we do? Can we do this, this, and this? And no one ever wants to tell the director no, like we can't do that. So we find ways to do these things, and this was a lot of fun because we got to use real squibs, which are always, they slow things down with resets when you blow somebody's wardrobe out and have blood. The resets are longer, but I really wanted to use squibs. We had to supplement them a little bit in a few shots, but for the most part, mostly practical blood. It's I love doing those kind of things. I love the action part is really it's always a challenge, and each shot, each scene is a challenge, and how are you going to accomplish it and achieve what you want for the finished product. But this was great team around us, and couldn't be happier with it.
Yeah, no, the squibs are again like a Tarantino movie. It's more practical, more real. It just looks better. Also, the film is edited very well. It's like a tight 101 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. It goes by super quickly. I'm curious, how did this movie change from the assembly to the final cut?
Well, I've heard and will definitely agree with the sentiment that the day that you see your first assembly for any filmmaker is like the worst day of your life, because you've got like, a 2 hour, 20-minute film or whatever it is that where no real creative decisions have been made. It's just basically like, here's the movie you shot. And, over the next few months, you chip away at it every day, little by little. And next thing you know, you're bring it into some sort of tolerable length. And then you start to really fine tune. We definitely, made some changes in the edit room, left a few things on the floor there, and just tried to stay true to what we thought we were setting out to make. And there's definitely, I love having a great experienced talented editor like Mark Warner who cut this, because there are times as a filmmaker where you're attached to something you shot and yet it's not moving the story forward, and there are tough decisions that have to be made with, like, cutting off your arm and leaving it in the edit room because the film would be better without it, and we had to do a little bit of that for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It flew by. I mean, I watched it twice, and it was like even the second time, definitely well paced. I also really enjoyed Carrie's arc in the movie. She starts out thinking she's invincible, and then once shit hits the fan, she panics and the facade goes away. I'm curious, what was it like working with Nina Dobrev, she brings a lot of comedy to the movie, but also you guys crafted a really good character arc.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, she was amazing. She really embraced this character who is definitely delusional. I think that with that character, it was really about being true to this story of hers and being like, she's been working at this bank and she's obsessed with the movie Point Break, and she's been looking for a sign, something that tells her that there's, something is going to happen in her life. She's been waiting for this. And when Aaron comes in and starts making these large cash deposits, she says that's the 50-year storm that she's been looking for. That's a sign. And she uses the leverage she has to basically force herself upon him as a partner. And she's looking for this adrenaline. She's looking for this her story, her adventure. She is the lead character in her story, and she's found it, and it's all fun and games until it's not. And, I think Nina just embraced it and went with it, and her delusion was completely believable until something happens that, changes that for her.
Definitely. And I also loved the end credits scene where she goes off on the Point Break remake. I'm curious, why was Point Break the right movie for her to be obsessed with? And how much improv did she do, as well as the cast in general, if any?
In thinking about, what would make a bank teller want to partner up with someone who she knows is into some kind of robbery. Yeah, it just seemed like, I mean, being obsessed with the movie Point Break made sense, constantly quoting Point Break and thinking that that would make her life, that would be an exciting new version of herself that she's been waiting to happen, it just worked. And the end credit sequence was improv when we were shooting her giving the testimony, or not, giving the interview to the cops talking about what had happened. We just started riffing on some ideas. I felt like, what would Carrie say at this point? She's been brought back to reality, but at the same time, she's now meeting these feds who, might make her think about Keanu and Point Break, and maybe she's going to say, "Hey, either you guys surf, or you've seen the movie Point Break or whatever." And it was just fun. It was just, we were just having fun with it. So, as far as improv in general, I think working with all these characters, all these actors to take ownership of their characters, I should say. To me, what's always really important is the subtext of what I need out of a scene. And if an actor has an idea that I think could accomplish it, but also give them ownership of their character and let them try some things, I'm always open to trying things. I think that it's about making sure you leave that day with what you are going to need in the edit room. So having options is always great, and I think that sometimes it was improv, sometimes it was stopping production and going and rewriting a scene. And when you're dealing with the kind of talent that I had on this film, I mean, we rewrote a couple of scenes right before shooting, and everybody just like ran with it. Nobody froze up. Nobody had a problem with it. It was like they were inhabiting these characters in a way that making some changes on the day just worked. So it's great to be in that position, to have that luxury of an amazingly talented cast. I mean, being able to sit back and watch these actors sort of collide on screen was such a pleasure.
Absolutely. Also, I think a lot of people are going to watch this movie because they're either Vampire Diaries fans or Breaking Bad fans. I'm curious if you fall into either camp, and if you had to resist the urge to give Aaron Paul a line with the word bitch in it.
My 15-year-old son is a fanatic, a Breaking Bad fanatic, and he kept trying to tell me that I needed to do that. And I'm thinking, as though Aaron hasn't had that request, on every other project he's done. So I avoided that. I resisted it. I didn't go there. I think he's really so talented and really brings such a special vibe to Jeff. And Jeff stands on his own. I didn't want Jeff to have a connection in that way, except for, with the actor playing him. And I wanted to give Aaron the runway to kind of inhabit this character without it being linked to Jesse.
Absolutely. He was very different than Jesse. And I was excited because in the opening credits, it says, and Aaron Paul. But then watching the movie, he's in it a lot. So I'm very happy because I love Breaking Bad.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Also, I love the soundtrack for this movie. You have some really great needle drops, as well as a score by Brian Senti that really gets the adrenaline pumping I'm curious, how did you go about selecting the songs with your music supervisor, and how did you decide when to use score instead, for different scenes? Because every scene needs something different, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, first off, Brian is amazing and I think did such a wonderful, masterful job of letting the score give voice to each of these characters in a unique way that speaks to who they are, while also having everything work under the umbrella of the score for the whole movie, not being drastically different, even though these characters are very different. So Brian is wonderful. This is the third film I've done with him, and feel very fortunate that he was able to do this with us. I think as far as needle drop goes, I knew there was some things I really wanted, whether it was Luke's karaoke, we decided early on that was the song that it needed to be. Suspicious Minds, a little Vegas-y Elvis version of Suspicious Minds. But then, like the end of the film, for instance, the Gypsy Kings version of Hotel California, which people know from probably most notably from Lebowski, but it's just sort of teased in Lebowski a little bit. Just the guitar probably when they're introducing John Turturro's character. But I wanted to use that for the end credits song because, it just sort of spoke to Manco and his journey and kind of his cartel connection and just felt like the right thing to do at the end of the movie. So I'm really big on music when it comes to, I develop a playlist when I'm writing. Both of those songs were in there in the playlist. There's some other things. There's, Stay On by A Bad Think is in the car in a scene that was in the playlist. But a friend of mine, this song I've always loved. I make a playlist when I'm writing so that I start to see these, helps me see these scenes. So the fact that some songs stick through the entire process is great. So tall order for a music supervisor to negotiate, music rights for something that's already kind of woven into the film, right?
If people are going to do a double feature of Unhinged and Get Out, which one should they watch first?
Good question. I think that Get Out will probably make them, leave them feeling a little bit better about the world and about life and about a lot of things. They'll go through quite a bit to get to that point with both films. I would say Get Out actually leaves you with a little bit, maybe a feeling that I would rather be left with than this sort of nihilistic kind of wasteland that Unhinged leaves you with.
Yeah, the Get Out is the chaser of the two.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's dessert. It's the dessert, I think, maybe.
Yeah. And you mentioned the Joneses, out of all your previous movies, is there one you would shout out as like people should go back and watch this one? Because most people have probably seen Unhinged. So like other than that one, which of your previous films should people go back and check out?
I would say American Dreamer with Jim Gaffigan. A very small film I did in terms of budget, scale, but it's my favorite film in terms of, working on it was my favorite. It was 16 Nights, small film, and it's dark. And it's really what got Russell to want to work with me. It's what, I've had so many actors reach out after seeing that film saying, I want to work with you after seeing what you did with that. And it really didn't get the kind of release that, I wish it would have. And so anybody I can steer towards American Dreamer, I think you'll see a career defining performance by Jim Gaffigan in a role very unexpected for him, as well as, some great performances by the rest of the cast, and really resourceful film that I think is kind of unbelievable that we were able to accomplish with the resources we had, let's say.
Absolutely. I'm definitely going to go back and watch that one. I love Jim Gaffigan, and would be cool to see him in a drama. And sir, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. Congrats on the movie. I think fans are really going to enjoy this one. Before we go, please let the audience know where they can follow you on social media so they can keep up to date with everything you have going on.
At Derrick Borte, Instagram. That's probably the spot to find me. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, thanks for, having such insightful, interesting questions about the film.
Of course. And there will be a link to your Instagram and to a link to buy tickets in the description. To everyone listening, please go watch The Get Out in select theaters on June 26th and available at home wherever you buy and rent movies on June 30th. Super entertaining. Highly recommend it. And that does it for today's episode of the Cinema Flow podcast. Thank you all for listening. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.